Speaking truth and power, unlocking minds, one day at a time, day at a time. Speaking truth and power, unlocking minds, one day at a time, day at a time. Truth of the matter is that truth really matters, yeah. Truth of the matter is that truth really matters, yeah. In the beginning, I was back and forth like Batman, lacking wisdom, no direction for proper decisions. I heard my bro had a show, so I started to listen. Truth of the matter, ain't no comparing the competition. The kid feeling blessed, cause it's clear as Windex. After talking with Dex, I know just where to step. I know the pack gon' be narrow, but my eyes on the sparrow. And the truth of the matter is that truth really matters. Truth of the matter, that truth really matters. Hey. Truth of the matter.
Hey, welcome to Truth of the Matter, where we are having transparent conversations, dealing with today's issues, and bringing solutions to navigate your world. I am your host, Dexter Peggins Jr. Listen, today's show should be an interesting one. It is entitled, We Are Living in the Matrix. Before we get started, one of the things I want to do is I want to share the quote of today. And today's quote is an oldie but goodie. I imagine that many of you all have heard this quote before. And today's quote is simply this: doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. Listen, I don't know who quoted it. I know that some people attribute that quote to Albert Einstein, but I'm going to lean on the opposite end of the spectrum and say that it was probably not him, but nevertheless, I think it is a worthy quote. If we're doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, then that is indeed insanity. Listen, today's topic, we are living in the Matrix. Listen, I'm a person who considers himself to be somewhat of a movie buff. I like movies, and the first Matrix was one of my favorite movies. The second one was okay. The third one was cool, and whatever this most recent one was straight garbage. But nevertheless, I have had the privilege of living on this spinning green and blue ball for a little over 40 years now. My kids, they often say that I'm ancient, but I like to believe that I'm a youthful 40 plus. But what I will say is that one of the things that my older age affords me is the opportunity to contrast different eras by way of experience, as opposed to having to rely on history books. I do remember the floor model TVs. I remember rotary phones. I remember furniture in that front room with the plastic on it. I remember school, when I was in school, when the teacher would wheel in the TV with the remote setup, with the VCR setup into class, and that was normally a good day. I think for many of you all, if you can remember that, that was probably on a Friday, probably one of those real good days when everything was real chill. You had the rare treat of getting the opportunity to watch a movie in class. Well before 2K, I remember when the best game on the market was Oregon Trail. So I know I'm definitely dating myself. And listen, for my youngsters, or for my peoples who grew up in the 90s, I know you all can remember this. If you had a pager, that was definitely the original form of being on a baller status. You was the man or you was the woman if you had a pager back in those days. And so needless to say that I've been around and I've seen a lot of changing dynamics, especially in the area of technology, especially in the way of society and how societal norms have changed, even in my short time here on this earth. And what I want to say is that maybe it was because our world didn't expand beyond our inner circles, our neighborhood friends, or our families. Maybe because our access to the world was so limited that, to me, and this is just my opinion, but to me it seemed like things were a lot more simple back then. And not only were they simple, it seemed like things made a lot of sense back then. Things weren't really that complicated. There were principles and there were codes that almost seemed universal. My dad, he was a military man, and so we moved a lot when I was young. But nevertheless, wherever I found myself living within these continental United States, it seemed like everybody understood these universal codes and principles that I myself was being guided by. It would just be cool and, let things come as they will. But everybody had this kind of almost this inherent understanding of how things were supposed to go. Now, listen, don't get me wrong. I am a man who believes in the concept of adapt and overcome. However, a lot of what we're seeing in this world today seems like something out of a weird movie. For the better part of about 3 or 4 years now, I've been telling people it almost feels like we're living in a very long episode of The Twilight Zone. Or even The Matrix, since that is what I'm using as a point of reference today. It's almost like we are on this programmable loop every day, 24 hours a day, 365, where we're being told what to believe. If they want us to be afraid, whether you wake up in the middle of the night or wake up early in the morning, it seems like we're seeing constant and we're hearing constant messages of doom and destruction. Literally, we have whole news stations. I want you to think about this. Multiple differing news stations that will be reporting on the same story, but they're shaping the story to their own political affiliation. And what happens is that if you listen long enough, you'll find yourself hating your neighbor, not because they did anything to you, just because of the fact that they have a flag in their yard and you might not like the color of their hat. When we go on social media, and I imagine that many of you can attest to this right now, and if not, I just want you to look at it next time you're on there. But they're literally rehashing things that cater to our emotions, and they block the things that require our intellect. And the sad thing is that we have so many vices at our fingertips, things that make life convenient. And listen, I love convenience. I love the fact that I can order anything and it'll be at my doorstep, in some instances the same day or the next day, depending on what it is. But because of all of these vices that are at our fingertips, it's almost like there is no incentive for us to question things. Why are things the way they are? And it's almost like we find ourselves being surprised when we encounter somebody who has a difference of opinion. Listen, what I want to tell you all is simply this. Anything that encourages the underutilization of deductive reasoning should be scrutinized. Why, you might be asking? Well, I'm glad you asked. Because when we're robbed, in essence, anything that encourages the underutilization of deductive reasoning, what it does is it puts us in a position where we're being robbed of the ability to come to a conclusion for ourselves. I'm going to let that marinate for a second. We're literally being robbed of the opportunity to come to a conclusion for ourselves. And the reality is, what if I disagree with your position? Not because I'm your enemy, but because I see things differently. Ladies and gentlemen, if you can jive what it is that I've just been rambling on about for the last 10 minutes, 9 or 10 minutes, then what I will tell you is that you are aware of the classic underpinnings of this thing called the Matrix. And I am of the opinion that we are at a critical juncture in time where we are going to have to knowingly and intentionally acknowledge our willingness to accept the red pill of truth or the blue pill of ignorance. Now listen, when we come back from a quick commercial break, I want to highlight a few areas in life where I believe that we're going to have to make some real decisions concerning our future. Some areas that we cannot afford to continue to overlook, to hope, and to assume that things are just going to happen favorably for us. You know, we're going to have to exercise some willpower and the diligence to make those things happen. And so we'll be right back after this commercial break, and we'll continue with this episode of Truth of the Matter.
There is a prevailing crisis that has crippled families and communities for decades. This crisis has a direct association to higher crime rates, increased poverty, and cost the nation millions of dollars annually. The crisis is the epidemic of fatherlessness. What would the world look like if fathers were not only physically present, but emotionally available as well? What would the conversation between the repentant father and the dejected son sound like? Recognizing that sons, both young and old, need to hear a heart of a father serves as the motivation for this literary work. This book is for those who need wisdom and guidance, never had those necessary moments with their father, or wish they had more moments with their father. Through the affirmation of a father's love, this book will traverse the difficult path from disappointment to hope, and from alienation to reconciliation.
Hey, and we're back. That was the commercial for my book, Dear Son, The Words of a Father to the Heart of a Son. Listen, shameless plug, or no shameless plug. I don't know how that works right now, but what I'll say is that I am not ashamed to say that I believe that book is one of the most necessary books out right now. The book deals with the topics of father wounds, and if that's an unfamiliar phrase, essentially a father wound is the pain that the son and daughter feels as a result of the father not being present, whether it be physically or emotionally, and how that spells out over the course of their life and how it impacts their character and their overall being as an adult. In addition to tackling that encompassing or overarching theme, there's a number of topics in there as it pertains to overall manhood. You'll be surprised how many people assume that a male who's an adult, how they should have their act together. And the reality is that a lot of times we hold people accountable for stuff that they may not have been taught. And so there's issues concerning relationships, finances, overall character within this book. And I believe that it will be a true gift to the people in your life. And so do me a favor, visit my website, dexterpegansjr.com, get yourself a copy, or even visit Amazon is there as well. So listen, continuing on this conversation of stuck or living in the matrix, we discuss hitting a few topics as it pertains to what we do when we choose to take on this red pill. And so the first area that I'll put before you is the area of finances. Now, what I'll tell you all as a caveat or a little preface is that I am not an economist. I don't work on Wall Street. But what I am is somebody who gives a great deal of attention to the economic sectors. I'm an investor. I also own properties, working. So essentially, I'm a landlord. And so there's a great deal of attention that I give into these sectors. And what I'll say is that because I give a lot of attention to that, I understand, I have a pretty good understanding, a working understanding of how things should be operating. And what I'll tell you is that there's something horribly going wrong in our system, and the mainstream media is not talking about it. Now, their silence could be associated with the fact that maybe they do not want to create hysteria, but their unwillingness to talk about it is not an excuse for us to not ask questions, and as a result of those questions, come up with a solution to get ahead of what I perceive to be coming. Essentially, what I see coming, in many instances, you can probably see it right now, is that people are literally being priced out of survival. When you go to the store, the products are limited and they are priced higher. And you might say, well, Dexter, that's simple economics. That's economics 101. That's the law of supply and demand. And to some degree, I may agree with you on that. But what I also say is that a lot of the products are limited, not because people are buying excess, but a lot of these products are limited because production is decreasing. And a lot of the decrease is because businesses cannot afford to stay in business, which in turn means that as these businesses go out of business, that means unemployment rises. If you couple unemployment with rising inflation, now you have people who cannot afford to buy food. And there's several reports out right now how people can't even afford to buy homes or even rents. And so in essence, what ends up happening is that we are cultivating the grounds of a disaster. And this grounds for this disaster is being birthed from the desperation of the people who cannot afford to live. Let me ask you all this, particularly for those people who are working a job. This is something that I would strongly encourage you to consider. Is your job fortified for the future? Literally, what I mean by that is that are you working in an industry that you can see surviving or being around in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years? If so, then you might be in a good position. Are you postured to be around for the longevity of your working career? Now, if you look over your shoulder and you see the rise of AI and advanced technology, and your job is on the cutting board, or it can potentially be taken over by a machine, then the reality is it may be time to learn some new skills, some new industries as it pertains to giving your focus towards. Now, I don't want to tell you what job you should do, but I do want to suggest that these would be some things that we begin to think along the lines of. If we see the shift taking place in society, one of the worst things you can do is assume that there's going to be some type of help or assistance for you when your position gets phased out. I've been working in the government sector in some capacity for almost 25 years now. And one of the things that they will often tell us is that this is one of the safest industries. I'll tell you this, recently, within my industry, there was a large layoff within a particular program that I was working on. Now, the confidence was, hey, this will always be around because the government will always need you. But the reality is that even the sectors that we once assumed to be safe, they themselves are finding ways to begin to reduce their workforce. The other area that I want to put before you is the area of family. Parents are increasingly losing their rights to parent their kids. Some states are introducing legislation that is slowly giving the state more control of your home than, sadly, those who occupy the home. I'll let you do your own research, but children are being granted the opportunity to make decisions concerning their own health well before they even hit their teenage years. And I know you might say, well, some of that stuff is not impacting me right now, but what I'll say is this: if enough legislation is taking place somewhere else, it has a uncanny ability to begin to trickle into other areas. And therefore, by default, it begins to become an issue that we all must be concerned with. Ultimately, what it boils down to is this: as we begin to yield our control over to the government and to the state, you get weeded out of the equation. And so these are some of the things that we must consider as it pertains to the family. Exercising your authority, being vocal about the things that you see that you don't like. Here's the interesting thing about legislation. While it may be a law may be enacted right now, you might not feel it immediately. The reality is that eventually you will feel it. And what ends up happening is politicians begin to base their platforms around those laws that were enacted in our times of silence. And so they become whole platforms. And so much so to the point that now the laws, those foundational laws, they began, as I mentioned earlier, to phase us out and get us out of the equation. And now we feel and we become powerless and unable to do anything. Because listen, those politicians, they're holding terms for 4 6 years, 2 4 6 years. And so that's a whole, look at the window of time that goes by where essentially they're able to continue to build upon these rules and these doctrines that have robbed parents of their ability to exercise control in their own home. The last thing I'll say, and it ties right into that, is freedom. I know that's a kind of a broad word, but let me just say this, that a lot of people surrender their basic human rights of freedom because of the mechanism called fear. The more fear that is generated, the more freedom sadly gets surrendered. As a matter of habit, one of the things that I have began doing some time ago is that every time that I hear a message, one of the things I do is I consider what emotion is the messenger trying to elicit from me. And if it's fear, then ultimately I become skeptical of what it is that they're saying. God does not give us the spirit of fear. And so if fear is the tool, then I got to ask myself, what is the motivation behind what it is that they're trying to tell me? Listen, as we get ready to close on today, allow me to say this. Two of the greatest things that you can do for yourself is one, begin to ask questions. What is the motivation behind what it is that you're being told? And when you come to the truth of a thing, position yourself to be no longer dependent upon a lie. I'm Dexter Peggins, and I thank you for joining me on this episode of Truth of the Matter. We will see you all next time. Take care and God bless.
Speaking truth and power, unlocking minds, one day at a time, day at a time. Speaking truth and power, unlocking minds, one day at a time, day at a time. Truth of the matter is that truth really matters, yeah. Truth of the matter is that truth really matters, yeah. In the beginning, I was back and forth like Batman, lacking wisdom, no direction for proper decisions. I heard my bro had a show, so I started to listen. Truth of the matter, ain't no comparing the competition. The kid feeling blessed, cause it's clear as Windex. After talking with Dex, I know just where to step. I know the pack gon' be narrow, but my eyes on the sparrow. And the truth of the matter is that truth really matters. Truth of the matter, that truth really matters. Hey, truth of the matter.